University Art Museum, where you are currently the Tina Dunkley Fellow in Curatorial Studies. In the Tina Dunkley Curatorial Fellow. And I'd like to just acknowledge Lauren Harris and Rachel Brown from the AUC Art Collective, and to remind everyone who's joined us today that the AUC Art Collective is the first and only undergraduate program designed to be a pipeline for African American students to transform the art industry. And this is a pipeline and a program that takes place on the campus of the Atlanta University Center, including Clark Atlanta University, Morehouse College, and Spelman College. So I know that many of our students are joining us today, and I just wanted to put a shout out for the program that we have launched since the fall of 2019. And we're really making a mark on the art world, and we invite you all to join us on this important journey. I also just wanted to say a shout out to my daughter, Nora Finley, and Monica Dean, who is the director of the Conway Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Smith College. They are part of my pod as we shelter in place. And I just also wanted to say that I hope that you're all doing well, that you're staying safe, and a special shout out to artists and arts professionals in the art world. We're in this together, and part of the aim and the goal of our conversation today is to talk about what we're doing in our field, and also the really exciting and innovative work that TK has done as a Tina Dunkley Fellow. So with that introduction, I also want to share with you a quote that I know you probably all have heard before, but it's something that has resonated with me as we've entered into, I think it's maybe about week 6 of sheltering in place. And this is a quote that I am going to read from none other than the great late Toni Morrison. And she said, this is, quote, "This is precisely the time when artists go to work. There's no time for despair, no place for self-pity, no need for silence, no room for fear. We speak, we write, we do language. This is how civilizations heal. I know the world is bruised and bleeding, and through it, and though it is important, not to ignore its pain, it is also critical to refuse to succumb to its malevolence. Like failure, chaos contains information that can lead to knowledge, even wisdom, like art." So that was Toni Morrison writing in The Nation in 2015, in March of 2015, meditating especially on the impending 2016 elections. So I think that I just wanted to give you some context for what we're thinking, and also the way that this conversation will go. So TK, the first question. You received a master's in American Studies from St. Louis University, and you did your undergraduate work at St. Louis University as well, majoring in English and African American Studies. Can you begin by telling us how you became interested in writing about art and interviewing artists?
Sure. So way back when I was trying to decide what I wanted to do, I entered undergrad as a nuclear medicine and technology major, thinking that I would be an oncologist like every other person who enters SLU in undergrad, and quickly discovered that it was not making me happy. I took a career decisions course that was just a quarter of a semester, and it was the first time that I had been confronted with questions like, what do you value? What do you want to see every day when you go to work? What kind of workplace do you want to work in? How do you want to feel when you go to work? And I ended up in the English department reading Toni Morrison,
Right.
reading Zora Neale Hurston. Schuler soon led me to the African American Studies department because it's a holistic conversation. African American Studies is interdisciplinary, and in the African American Studies department is where I fell in love with interdisciplinary work.
Right.
And so I graduated wanting to be a writer and couldn't find a job, and I ended up getting a job in a library and thought I would be a librarian for a long time. What I loved about libraries was that they connected people directly to knowledge. And I ended up hanging out with a lot of artists, spending time with a lot of artists, falling in love with a lot of artists. And I thought, well, maybe I want to work in a museum. And I interned at the Contemporary Art Museum St. Louis under Kelly Schindler,
It's a
and
great museum.
discovered that amazing museum. And that's where I discovered that art, specifically contemporary art, is so responsive to the current moment that that's
Right.
where I needed to be. I
Right.
wanted to be in a museum. And so I ended up in American Studies, interdisciplinary, the combination of English and everything else you can imagine, history, sociology, anthropology, and ended up a Tina Dunkley Fellow.
Well, you know, TK, one of the things that you mentioned that I think is so important is in terms of your training is this idea, and not just idea, but practice of interdisciplinarity, right? That African American studies, that American studies is interdisciplinary. And when I think about the path that you've taken to earn the Tina Dunkley Fellowship at the CAU Art Museum, and also the work that you've been doing, at least since we've known each other in the past academic year, it also reminds me of the kind of coursework that we offer to our students at the AUC Art Collective, that they can major in art history and minor in curatorial studies. And the way that we are really thinking about rolling out art history and making a difference in the way art history is traditionally taught is to think about it as an interdisciplinary discipline, right? And we have to do that especially by infusing it with histories and traditions and culture of Africa and the diaspora in the way that we teach at the CAU, excuse me, at the AUC Art Collective. So in talking about your work as a Tina Dunkley Fellow, can you tell us more about who Tina Dunkley is, and also your fellowship and the CAU Museum, if you can give us maybe some historical context?
Sure. So Tina Dunkley is an amazing artist, art historian, performer, all around Renaissance woman. She is a graduate of CAU, and she discovered the collection in the basement after the Atlanta annuals, which built the collection, had long stopped. And she basically became the steward of that work. She established the CAU art galleries. She created a framework, had the library renovated to create a space on campus in the AUC to present this amazing collection, but also continue the work that Hale Woodruff had established by keeping art alive in the AUC.
Right, and so Hale Woodruff was the great African-American painter who, along with Nancy Elizabeth Prophet, established the Atlanta annuals. And these were painting annuals, I would say akin to what we might know today as the Whitney Biennial. These were organized exhibitions where artists were invited to contribute their work, to share their work at a time in the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, and up to 1970, when African Americans did not have places to typically exhibit their work in major museum spaces. So they really took the lead in doing that, and that Tina Dunkley had a hand in preserving this collection, which forms the basis of the CAU Art Museum, is really, really phenomenal. Great.
Yeah. And that
Great.
context is extremely important. Understanding that these artists could not show in other shows becomes a point of contention for the annuals throughout its history, because what builds it up at the beginning ends up being what tears it down at the end. So
Right.
thank you for contributing that.
Yeah, thank you. So, so can you tell us about some of the highlights of your fellowship? I know you have an amazing exhibition that you're going to share. You have the catalog in your hands. Tell us about what you've been doing this past year.
Well, to give some context, the Tina Dunkley Fellowship is a Domley Initiative Fellowship funded by the Walton Foundation and the Ford Foundation. And it was the brainchild of Dr. Marita Poole, who you acknowledged at the beginning of this conversation, Sarah Higgins, who is now the editor and art director at Art Papers, and Teresa Bromlett Reeves, who is at Georgia State, and the late Justin Rabideau. They came together wanting to create an interdisciplinary post-bac, not postdoc, but post-bac fellowship at multiple institutions of different sizes to create a mentorship structure that would allow for really indoctrinating people into this field. And so when we arrived, you know, we are in Nzinga and I, there is another fellow I should also acknowledge. Her name is
Yes,
Nzinga Simmons, and she's
Nzinga.
brilliant. When we arrived, you know, Dr. Poole came to us and said, well, what do you want to do? You know, the fellowship was open in the way that it was for museum leadership. She said, are you interested in education? Are you interested in this and this? And we both said we wanted to be curators. And she said, it's a curatorial fellowship. And that's that. And that's what it became. And all the mentorship we got from Sarah, from Teresa, from Dr. Poole has been teaching us how to curate in these different spaces. And even so far as to, I should acknowledge that Teresa and Sarah were the curators at the Zuckerman at Kennesaw State. And we also worked under Brittany Webb, Jody Throckmorton, Anna Marley at PAFA in Philadelphia. So we spent a semester in Philadelphia, which was also an amazing opportunity.
Right. So TK, I mean, talking about this structure, you're talking about a community that has supported your work during the time that you've been a Tina Dunkley Fellow, along with Nzinga. And this supportive structure, I think, is a conversation between you and Nzinga, who was the other Tina Dunkley Fellow, obviously Dr. Poole, other staff at the museum, and then the other individuals who helped to, and organizations that helped to bring this fellowship to fruition. I also want to just acknowledge the way that you have put out there that this is not a postdoctoral fellowship, rather it is a postbac. And that is something that we at the AUC Art Collective are also really, really interested in terms of not only being a pipeline for, say, high school students who are in the 11th and 12th grade who may wish to apply to our early college program in the summer, where they learn about art history, where they learn about curatorial studies in partnership with the High Museum, but rather, in addition to that, we're interested in developing pathways for our students once they finish, whether they decide to go on to directly into graduate school, or whether they might be interested in doing a post-baccalaureate fellowship like the kind that you've had. So I know that there are a lot of conversations that are being had with other museum directors around the country about developing programs like this to be able to support African-American students as they finish in their undergraduate studies in art history and curatorial studies. So,
and
yeah, go on. Yeah, go on.
I want to acknowledge that Dr. Poole made the extra effort to pull a fellow who was not an art historian. And me being a material culture focused, you know, researcher, scholar, coming into this field seems like a slight left to a lot of people because it's a field run by art historians, but there are, like Dr. Brittany Webb, anthropologists like Dr. Poole herself, and anthropologists.
Right. Exactly.
There are, just as you played upon the importance of interdisciplinary work, curators have to come from an interdisciplinary, rich and diverse field of thought and knowledge. And so Dr. Poole was specifically thinking of that when she chose me and as one of these fellows. And it's the kind of work that I feel like has made CAU an extremely strong museum because of just the diverse thought she's brought into the space.
Right. I would totally agree with you. I mean, especially given the fact that her background is in anthropology, and also acknowledging, I think, the relationship between not only interdisciplinarity, but also the relationship between anthropology and art history in the history of museums and curatorial practice, right? So if you can look at the difference between, say, a history museum that might exhibit African art versus an art museum that might exhibit African art, you're going to come up with two different kinds of exhibitions, different kinds of information that's displayed, and also you know, different ways in which the actual exhibition will be laid out before you, in front of you. So Nicole Fleetwood is on. Nicole Fleetwood, I just want to say hello. As you know, Nicole Fleetwood was the first person that we began these conversations with last Thursday at noon, discussing her book that is about to be launched, I think in just a matter of days, this coming Tuesday, Marking Time, Art in the Age of Mass Incarceration. Check that out. I think at the Museum of Modern Art New York website, you'll find more information about that book launch that's going to be a virtual book launch taking place next Tuesday, the 28th of April. But to get back to our conversation, TK, so could you please say something about Looming Chaos, your exhibition?
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
we want to see some of the images and
Yes.
hear about.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can say a lot about Looming Chaos. So this is where things get dangerous because I'm long-winded and sentimental. Looming Chaos is the cumulative project for my portion of the Tina Dunkley Fellowship. It's a mid-sized exhibition. It's a solo exhibition of Atlanta-based artist Zephora Camille Thompson. That is up now, kind of, at the Zuckerman Museum of Art. It has now been extended through the summer, through July 26th. And yes, we're very, very fortunate to hopefully allow more time for people to get to spend time with this amazing, amazing work. But if not, we have a catalog that was produced for the exhibition. It's a full color catalog. It features a foreword by Dr. Poole, and afterward by Teresa Bromlett-Reeves. It features a conversation between Zephora and Deidre Brackens that is also available on CAU's YouTube. It's an hour and 16 minutes, so tuck in.
So wait, are you saying, TK, that on the CAU YouTube there is a virtual tour?
There's not a virtual tour. There is a transcribed conversation, and this is kind of like the front page of that, called The Meditation on the Loom, between Zephora and Deidre Brackens, who is an LA-based weaver. I brought them together because I wanted to hear two weavers talk about their process and their practice. Looming Chaos is about Zephora's process and practice. It's about how she makes her work, the conceptual backing of her work, and how her work is an expression of craft and craft traditions, as well as abstraction, as well as material culture. She's an amazing, amazing woman, and I hope all of you follow her on Instagram, Zephora Camille Thompson. If you don't mind, I would like to read something from the dedication and acknowledgments, because this book and this exhibition are both dedicated to two people. One is the late Justin Rabideau, who was the director at the Zuckerman Museum of Art at Kennesaw State, who we lost in the duration of this fellowship. And the other is my big mama, my paternal grandmother. So just, it's real short, I promise.
Thank you, TK.
No problem. And I think it's timely. I'm very concerned with the message of this exhibition getting out before, you know, it's too late. But Looming Chaos was conceived out of personal yearning for structure, order, and wholeness. It matured through instability, loss, and mourning. I am mourning the death of my paternal grandmother, Ruth Smith. She was buried days before I got on the plane to begin this fellowship. I am mourning the death of Justin Rabideau, our director at the Zuckerman. His death just months into the fellowship has been defined by regret. People come into our lives so briefly that in hindsight, every short moment feels like a missed opportunity. I consider it a blessing and a privilege to have known both of these people. To my family and my friends, my colleagues who have all suffered great loss in the duration of this fellowship, my offering to you is this solo exhibition of Zephora Camille Thompson's work. Perhaps it will help you, as it has helped me, to begin to not only process chaos, but to conceive of something beyond it. And so I wanted to read that. One, to thank everybody who made this fellowship and this exhibition possible. I want to thank you so much for everyone who took the time to give real mentorship, who gave the time to really think about what I was thinking about and thinking about how I felt. This was an extremely difficult time for everyone involved. And now we find ourselves in an extremely difficult time in the world.
Right.
And as you quoted Toni Morrison, it made me think, you know, this is when we go to work. Absolutely. And this is when we acknowledge that we've been doing the work. You know, people have been thinking about these things and exploring fears and exploring the unknown. And that's the meat of Zephora's practice. And so that's why the show is called Looming Chaos. Right. It's about being able to, oh, sorry.
It's about being able to go on.
It's about being able to conceive of something beyond what seems imperceptible. It's about being able to make something out of nothing.
Right. And as you said, that's what we've been doing for so long, you know, more than 400 years, for so long. So I just also wanted to acknowledge, and I really, I think we all really appreciate you reading that, that acknowledgement, because it comes from the heart, it comes from the experience of working on the exhibition, but it also, it's so prescient. It's so prescient, as you note, you know, where we are right now. In the art world, living through, living with this pandemic, and I hope that we can continue to think about how you know, our families and artists and people that we work with are doing and coping through the pandemic as we continue our conversation. And I want to go back to the title of the exhibition, because I know you have something to say about, you know, the meaning of that title as it relates to not only Zipporah's practice, but also how it in of itself is again, I mean, timely, because you wrote that dedication well before we were sheltering in place and hunkering down, right?
Yeah. So, looming chaos, obviously, Sephora is a weaver. She uses 5 different types of looms. She hand looms, crochets, embroiders, sews, anything you can think of, felts, she does it. And in wanting to understand the beauty and the labor that goes into craft tradition, I wanted to focus on the loom as a site of reconstruction, rebirth, renewal of thought, of trauma, of pain, of actual material. So I'm most interested as a scholar in material culture. And one of the things that Sephora incorporates into her woven works are found objects, found materials. She has a work that we have up in the gallery that was literally something she found on the side of the highway. This work here, it's called Mutant, features a wasp's nest. You know,
Wow.
she's using the loom as a point of taking the meaning and symbolism behind objects to transform them into abstractions, to change thought, to create new thoughts, to change how we perceive of things. And that's a good meditative way to go through life and understand that traumas, hurts, pains, things will happen, but there is a point of renewal, of rebirth, of reconsideration.
Right.
If we acknowledge it.
So can I just, in some of the images that you just shared with us, and also seeing who's joined us already today, I see that Sarah Khan is here, and we're so happy that you've joined us. Also, Dr. Kelly Jones is on, and you probably remember, we all know that yesterday was the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, and there are many people who made connections between climate change and the current global health crisis. And so I wanted to ask you a question about how we might look at Zipporah's conceptual work and aesthetic process as sort of a prescient antidote in and of itself to our own times. And I'm thinking about the discarded materials that you were just discussing that she works with, and how, you know, weaving can be a way to work things out, but also to kind of even put together things that might seem to be contradictory or at odds with one another.
Absolutely. So a lot of her work is sculptural assemblage, soft sculpture, tapestry. She incorporates a lot of texture, a lot of material. She likes disparate. She likes to play with the organic and the inorganic, all to kind of communicate this kind of clash between our interconnectedness, between the cosmic, what we can touch, rivers, bodies, oceans, and the inorganic, plastics, trash, metals, all of these things that don't seem to quite fit together in our world. She can bring together and show a new way of understanding that unison. And I think in a world that feels full of chaos, she
Right.
would knit all of these things together to create something new. That's new thought, that's hope. And she would be upset with me, I believe, if I didn't say that the work is about hope, conceiving hope, working through trauma to find hope, because even if it doesn't turn out optimal, it can turn out better than, and it will change because things continue to move. Yeah, I think her work is extremely important. I wrote a very sentimental post about it for the Zuckerman. If you have any interest in reading a long sentimental post about one of the specific works called the Zul Electrica, that is meant to represent the earth.
We love sentimental posts, TK. We do. And look, I can be, anyone who's on here who knows me knows that I can also be a little bit long-winded myself, and I guess today a little bit tongue-tied. But, you know, in hearing you talk about her practice and, you know, working with the materials and the loom and this message of hope, it also makes me think about how, you know, being in this, you know, experiencing and living in this world of a pandemic, we've also been asked to, or invited to, take time to step back, to think, to rethink, and I think that time, that it's not necessarily that we all have time on our hands. I think many of us are in and out of Zoom meetings and managing our children, sheltering in place, managing the ways that we are all teaching, and then teaching young ones and elders as well. But to be able to have, the time to just pause or press pause for a moment is something that her work, in the way that she goes about collecting materials, but also working on the loom. Anyone who knows about that kind of practice, it takes time. And sometimes when you have that time, it gives you the bandwidth, pun intended, for your ideas to be able to change shape and to take different forms. I remember seeing her work. I unfortunately didn't have a chance to get to your show at the Zuckerman. We were all planning to take a busload of students from the AUC Art Collective for the Spring Arts Festival in late March. But I did get to go to the opening at the Mint. It's the Mint at the Meet, right?
Mint at the Met.
Mint at the Met, sorry, Mint at the Met. I'm new to Atlanta. Mint at the Met. But she had some work on view there, and I fell in love with one piece that I'm saving my ducats for when we get out of this.
Yeah, and I love to hear that. I love that you want to provide support, and I love that I'm able to come into this space and say, like, please support her. Please support all the artists in your life. If you want to interview her, I have a connect. If you want to review the show, that's great, because whether, this show continues or not, she will continue making work. Artists will continue making work.
That's right.
They'll still need your support. So I really appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you, TK. Right, and you're right. Lauren Harris, our program coordinator, and Rachel Brown, and I'm sure on your team as well. We've been looking at a number of the different posts that have come out, articles that have come out about how this is affecting the Black arts community. And one of the things we really want to encourage everyone to do is to go to your Black-owned gallerist or dealer or artist, and if you have the ability, to support them in any way, please do so. Look at other programs and collectives that are pooling their resources to support artists, because this is the time when we all do need your support. And I also want to just give a shout out to Neil Grasty. He is joining us in the fall. He is someone who participated in our summer program, our early college program last year in the inaugural cohort. He will be a freshman at Morehouse, and we're just really excited that he has decided to major in art history and minor in curatorial studies. And Neil is someone who is, he is so engrossed in his studies. He is so motivated, self-motivated to find resources. I noticed that he joined us on yesterday. So yesterday was an amazing day. It was when I teach my class, normally a seminar in slavery and visual culture, taught out of the Department of Art and Visual Culture at Spelman for the AUC Art Collective. And we had the great opportunity to have Hank Willis Thomas on with us to talk about his work at the EJI Legacy Museum and the process of that work being commissioned, and also the work that he's going to be doing in Boston on the Common, the work called The Embrace, which is a large-scale public work to commemorate Dr. Martin Luther King and meeting his wife in Boston and what that means. And so we can meditate on that a little bit later. But what I wanted to say about yesterday, in addition to teaching my class and meeting with my team on a regular morning check-in, we also had a number of different really, really powerful live opportunities to engage with African American and African diasporic artists, including Isaac Julian, who was being interviewed via the Neuberger Museum, where his Western Union small boats exhibition is on view, an exhibition that was originally conceived in 2007 that had a direct conversation with the migration crisis in the Mediterranean. That was at 1 o'clock. And then later in the afternoon, Dr. Kelly Jones and Dr. Bridget Cooks were in conversation around the work of Ruth Waddy, a really amazing, amazing artist, entrepreneur, ahead of her time, who ends up in Los Angeles, and that was through Art Plus Practice in Leimert Park. And then we also had the chance to step into a conversation that took place via the Hammer Museum that was a really amazing conversation with Erin Christovale, the curator, who was in conversation with Jatovia Gary about her Giverny project. And so just in mentioning that, it seems like there's so much going on. I know that we often have like this, you know, how do we arrange our days? How do we take it all in? Luckily, many of these conversations, ours included, they will be archived and available. So just look out for this conversation later if you're not able to join us, and also check out the other ones that I mentioned that took place yesterday. And I also want to say, and let me just stop talking, TK, please join me. We're supposed to be talking sound bites.
Well, I mean, going back to something you said about having a moment to pause, I think that when you take that moment to pause, you realize how tense and how heavy life is sometimes. And I feel like we have to revel in that. It takes effort for things to be normal, just as much effort as it takes for things to be chaotic. And it's a good time to reevaluate your priorities and explore new things. And I think that a lot of artists are adjusting, trying to make sure that they get their content directly to you because they have something to say about the human condition, about survival, and about processing things. And I feel like get to as much of it as you can because we're only going to work through it together. You know, it's a way of interconnectedness.
That's right. And we're all trying new ways, as you said. We're all really trying new ways. So can we get back to some of the conversations? So we've had a number of questions that TK and I talked about. Some things are just coming in there off the cuff, but I wanted to have you say something about the mark that you've made on the Atlanta art scene, because you've really been in the mix for some time. You've done work with Atlanta Contemporary. You mentioned also Art Papers Live. So if you could say something about, you know, what you're doing in and around Atlanta that augments the work that you're doing at the CAU Museum in your fellowship, but also how the Atlanta art scene is, I want to say, different. You know, it's not, I've spent a lot of time in New York City, and that's where I kind of cut my teeth in the art world. But it's not New York City. It's Atlanta, and it's special for many, many ways, many different reasons.
I feel like what is very special about Atlanta's art scene is that the ground is so rich. Like, I live on MLK. If I threw a rock down MLK, I'd hit 5 artists waiting for Mr. Everything's. Like, there's so many artists here doing on so many different levels and so many different media historically here, you know, that it's undeniably a force for art, whether it's acknowledged nationally or globally. Artists are popping up out of the ground every day in spaces like the AUC, where it can be cultivated, in spaces like CAU's Art Museum. As far as
Shaniqua Gay is on with us today, right? Shaniqua, she's here. And we had the great pleasure of taking our class, Minding the Museum, a museum studies course taught by Professor Bernita Webb-Bender, to her studio, and Lauren Harris helped to arrange that. So yeah, you're right. I mean, there's so many artists in Atlanta, and in a way, I think one of the things that I love about Atlanta and the art scene is that it's you know, I think for a national scene, there's a way in which there are some names that are known, but there's so many people who are on the radar, and they're in a way like okay with that, working furiously in their studios, producing work, and also connecting with people in and around Atlanta and also in the Southeast. And that's a different way to think about the work that we do. I think also the combination of the history, the civil rights history especially, but also the history of more recent history of the film industry being in Atlanta is another way to think about how some of what is done, you know, some of the things that artists think about and do in Atlanta is a little bit different.
Well, since you brought up the civil rights movement, I'm going to shamelessly plug the
Hey,
recently released new issue of Art Papers, Arts in the New Civil Rights era. It kind of it poses the question, are we existing in a new era of civil rights, separate from the era we traditionally understand from the 50s, the 60s, separate from the Black arts movement and the Black power movement? Is this now a new movement? And if so, what defines it? And it's
right.
full of writers and artists who are interrogating this moment and the continuous, because I feel like it's continuous fight for equal citizenship in the United
It
States.
is.
And specifically in the AUC, there are three people I'm going to call out. One is Lauren Tate Baeza, who is the cultivator, the curator of the Morehouse MLK papers at the Center for Human and Civil Rights. She writes an introduction that kind of frames this issue. And
Fantastic.
then, yeah, she's amazing.
And
If you ever get to
she's
listen to
also been so generous with her time as well, in terms of working with our students. I know that she had a session with one of our classes last week. So thank you so much, Lauren K. Baeza.
amazing woman. Then there is also my fellow Tina Dunkley fellow and colleague and friend Nzinga Simmons, who this is her catalog from her exhibition Unbound, also
Oh, it's
on
beautiful.
July 26th at the Zuckerman Museum of Art. And she does a profile on Tariku Shifra, which is one of her artists. Her exhibition shows the breadth of CAU's collection in the abstract sense. She starts with Romary Bearden. She starts with Sam Gilliam and the works we have in the collection, and then takes it to the contemporary moment with Tariku and artists like Anthony Akimbola and Atlanta-based artist Krista Clark. So she had the profile in there. And then a Spelmanite I was recently introduced to through Dr. Brownlee, her name is Tyra Seals, also wrote a profile for the artist who is on the cover. She's amazing, an amazing art historian. Y'all should look out for all these people. Shout out to Art Papers for one, posing an essential question. Are we in a new era of civil rights, especially in the COVID times?
Right.
And then pulling from the great resource that is the AUC, pulling from a space where civil rights has been a forefront issue for
It's been the foundation.
The foundation. And so
right.
Shout out to Art Papers. Please pick up the issue. It's only $10. It just came out. It's amazing. There's some amazing art in here. And I forgot to pub myself. Excuse me. I also
So let me just put a plug in there to add to that. So you can get your copy of Art Papers, of this recent edition of Art Papers on the website. It's available. If TK has a copy in his hands, you can have one sent to you as well. Let's support the USPS to get things, you know, sent to you in the mail. That things are still coming in the mail, so please order your copy right now. And so the other thing that Shaniqua Gay just said is that the civil rights focus is now on healthcare. That's absolutely right. It is on healthcare. Yes, especially it is. Yeah, thank you. All right, so I also want to say that we do have the question function available to us. So please, I see there's one question that's been sitting there. And I'm going to just pose this question and also just to invite everyone to please put your questions and we will try to address them. So this first question says, hi, I was wondering what is the best way to reach out to curators? As an artist, I'm barely even emerging. I get obsessed with the work, and it looks like it got cut off, the rest of it. But maybe TK, do you want to take that question?
Well, that's a hard question because I'm coming at it from the other end. I'm usually stalking around trying to find you. I work
That's
from
a great way to answer it.
I work from a material backing, so depending on the kind of work you make is the kind of curator, the kind of scholar you're going to attract. Zephora obviously speaks to me because she's interested in material. She's interested in the transformative power of material and meaning and how that helps shape our world and how we see ourselves. That kind of is on brand for me. And so I found her just by stating what I was interested in, keeping that interconnection between other artists, other thinkers, other writers will help the right people find you. And I feel like it's important as an artist to be very protective of who you share your work with, because every curator isn't the curator for you. Every writer isn't the writer for you. If you're creating work and you're creating and you're creating and keep showing it in the right spaces, and the right curator will find you, because some people just don't have the range, and so yeah, just keep doing what you do and send us stuff. Like, you can send me some JPEGs and some PDFs. I mean, my DMs are open.
That's great. That's really generous, TK. So, you know, and thinking about that too, you really referenced trying to have like a network, right? To try to have a network of people that you're able to show your work with. So I would also add to what you've said, TK, that, you know, as an artist, invite people to your studio, you know, have people come in to see your work, and try to, you know, develop networks with people that you know and you trust, who can help you to make connections to other people. And yes, I see some people seconding the points that you made. Dr. Kelly Jones, Shaniqua Gay, the right curator will find you, says Shaniqua Gay. Excellent advice. And, you know, the other thing I wanted to say, there have been some questions about how do we get a copy of your catalog. So we talked about how we can go to the Art Papers to order a copy of Art Papers, but what about your catalog? How can we get a copy of that?
Well, because of COVID and everything, it was very difficult getting even the first shipment of catalogs here. You can contact us directly at the Zuckerman. You can email me directly. It's on my profile, my Instagram profile, requesting a copy. They will be sold for $40, and they're worth it. If, you know, they are 100% worth it. Sephora's work is beautiful. This is a full color catalog. There's a suite of poems by Rosa Mendez. Diedrich Brackens is insightful. Everything in this catalog, I feel, is worth way more than $40. Of course, I'm going to say that I'm biased. I edited the book. But it's worth it, I promise. Email us. We will try our best to get it to you as soon as possible.
Thank you, TK. And it also, you also point out, just by mentioning all the people who've contributed to make it a catalog, it's not your run-of-the-mill artist catalog where you might just have images along with maybe your curatorial statement. Rather, you invited so many other people to be a part of this. And I think that's an example of the way you work interdisciplinarily. And also, I think really a big applaud to the foundation that you have in terms of your own studies in art history, your own studies in thinking about wanting to be a curator, and the mentorship that you have, the network of people that you've surrounded yourself with. So again, congratulations with the catalog. Can you show us, though, just now that we're speaking about it? I feel like we've only seen a little bit of it.
Okay, so this here's the cover. And
Isn't there like this amazing reflective page?
Yes, there is.
Yeah.
And if you're familiar with Sephora's work, this will make complete sense to you. There's an exposed binding because, again, bookmaking is a craft, and this is a craft-focused show. Let's see. We have this beautiful forward.
You're a little bit pixelated on my feed. I don't know if that's something that everyone else is seeing. So I hope we'll have to do like a little film of you showing your catalog so that we can see it clearly.
Yes, and this is my essay. And, you know, if you just can't wait, just let me know and I'll send you my essay. And if you're interested in the conversation, it is available on CAU's YouTube. CAU's YouTube holds the conversation between Zephora and Diedrich Brackens. It also holds very videos of Zephora herself speaking, breaking down kind of the three main components of the show. So the work does exist online. We're working on the show, depending on if the university opens or not. Zoom programming. Zuckerman.
Great. Is there a way, we have a question from a CAU alumna, Farron Manuel, who is in charge of the Mellon Curatorial Fellows at the High Museum. Hello, Farron, who asks if it's possible to make some of the images available after our conversation. Where might we find just some of the images from the catalog?
Without having to make you dig very deep in my Instagram, I will post some after this conversation.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you very much. Okay, great. So I have a couple, there like so many more questions. So there's a question that that asks if you could please talk about the benefits of your Young Artist Network in Philadelphia.
Okay, so I'm going to touch on some other things to get to this. So you are absolutely 100% right about mentorship. Dr. Poole made this fellowship a mentorship forward fellowship, and she made sure that there were lots of different people who could provide mentorship for us. And fortunately for Nzinga and I, everybody kind of provided those open arms. Everybody was willing. And I feel like if you're interested in diversifying the field or connecting young people to the field, those open arms make a huge difference, because so many younger people my age and younger I'm not that young, that's why I had to qualify that, but so many people who are trying to enter the field turn away from it because it is such a difficult field to get into. And it's exhausting to do the work that we do with the budgets that we do them with. But when you make it happen and you allow people into your space with open arms, allow that mentorship, it makes a world of difference. And Nzinga and I's time in Philadelphia was made so much better by the open arms of Dr. Brittany Webb, who is the roving curator now at PAFA. She introduced us to any and everybody she could. The fellowship was also structured to have us work between PAFA and the Brandywine Princeton Archives under Alan Edmonds. We also worked with the
place.
Museum. Yeah, you know, was, there was so much given to us that it was almost overwhelming. And there are so many. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt, but just quickly, I just want to say that you're again pointing out, you know, how important these networks are, these networks of mentorship, these networks of teaching, building foundations. And you know, you mentioned PAFA in Philadelphia. You mentioned Dr. Alan Edmonds. I mean, he's been working at it for years and years and years. And the Brandywine Workshop is such an important place, is such a foundational place for African-American printmaking. So thank you so much for bringing up this history and this legacy.
For sure. And there are Brandywine prints in the AUC. They were in the basement level of the Woodruff Library. I don't know where they are now. But there's a collection of Brandywine prints here in the AUC. We are considered a satellite location.
That's great to know. So Tiki, I have another question for you that's come up. How were you introduced to Zipporah's work?
I was introduced by Teresa and Sarah at the Zuckerman when they were both curators there. I kept telling them that I was obsessed with fiber art, textile artists. I wanted to do a show about quilting. I wanted to do a show about tapestries. I wanted to do a show about so many ways of articulating Blackness without using the physical body. And in a lot of the conversations we have about the G's bin quilts and material, there are so many artists working with actual objects. And the quilt, the fabric, that craft was one I was really interested in. And so they said, you have to go see Sephora. You have to go see Sephora. You have to see her. And I took the trek, and I was thankful that Nzinga was willing to drive all the way out to Stone Mountain. And this woman served us coffee and mugs she had made herself and showed us this beautiful studio. And again, just open arms, welcomed me into the concepts of her work, welcomed me into her space. And I connected so much with it that it had to happen. It had to happen.
Right. It had to happen. And it happened. So, I just want to encourage everyone out there to please continue to pose questions for us. And we have one question here. What does art mean as expression for Black people then now and in the future?
I, I'm gonna sound corny because I'm being put on the spot, but art is an expression of life in across mediums. I tell people all the time, and this is that fight between libraries and museums, right? Some people are good with a book. Some people can get everything they need from the written word, but some people cannot. Some people need you to tell them. Some people need you to sing it to them. Some people need to see it move through your body. Some people need to see it through the gesture of a pencil on paper. There's so many ways to communicate feeling, ideas, thoughts, fears, anything you can think of. And art, visual art, is another expression, another way of communicating from one mind to another. And I think that that makes anything. My grandmother's cooking is art. You know, the way that we dress our beds is art. The way
That's
that we put
right.
our hair is art. It's an expression of how we live. And when you don't have many means, when you are dealing a lot with oppression, that becomes everything. Every expression becomes more important, more significant, more distinct because everything is you. If
Right.
that
And
makes sense.
everything, and it matters. It really
And it
matters.
matters. It really matters.
So, a question from Farron Manuel. Given the current circumstances, have you embraced online exhibitions? And can you tell us your thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, at this point, so many institutions have made more of their work, more of their art accessible to me. So it's been kind of like a viewer or consumer of art, not necessarily as a curator of art. A few opportunities have appeared for me to explore this, and I'm trying to explore it with our collection at CAU. But we'll see. You know, I still have a physical show up that I'm trying to get to y'all. You know, I'm
I
trying to get y'all
know.
to get in there. But we're gonna figure out a way to get this, whether you can touch it, which you can't, whether you can touch it with your eyes in person, or if you can touch it through the screen, we'll figure out a way to get it to you.
Okay. Thank you so much, TK. So, I also want to echo Alexis Assam, who said to you that your answer was not corny, it was beautiful. I would agree. And you know, corny is sometimes good. So I also want to give a shout out to my dear friend and sister scholar, Dr. Adrienne Childs, who's going to be in conversation at 6 p.m. today. Where is it though? Lauren, where is it? Hold on, let me see. Is it 6 o'clock? Oh, wait, yes, with Shani Jamila. So check that out. I know that there's a post about it on AUC Art Collective. And we had the great pleasure, speaking of, you know, getting to see shows before they're shut down. We took a group of students to Washington, D.C. In the very beginning of March during our spring break. And we had the really, really wonderful pleasure of having a morning with Dr. Adrienne Childs in her exhibition that's at the Phillips Collection in Washington, D.C. now. So if you go to the Phillips website, you'll have a chance to see ways that they've been able to make that exhibition available to people online. And it's called Rifts and Relations. It's a really, really powerful and exciting meditation on work by African American and African diasporic artists on the sort of modernist moment. So, and it was the type of exhibition too where, you know how it is, TK, when you've been learning about an artist for like all of your life, or you've admired an artist for all of your life, and you've only ever had the chance to see a work by that artist in, say, a book or in a slide or in some medium that has been, it's been copied or reprinted or digitally manipulated in some kind of way, but to actually see works of art in the flesh, in a show, is something that it can be such a gift. And I think that when we took our students to see that exhibition and to hear Dr. Childs talk about the curatorial practice, it was something that really enabled us to see beyond what we had been looking at in class and also in textbooks. So I see that there are a couple more questions. We have approximately 4 minutes left. I'm sorry, we've been talking, I haven't seen these. All right, so let's see. let's see. Okay, this is a really great question. And again, we have about let's call it 3 minutes. What are your practices for self-care and preservation during and after large projects? I know you began talking about looming chaos, TK, with that really thoughtful and from the heart dedication in the opening of your catalog. But could you share with us your practices of self-care and preservation during and after large projects?
Because I'm a workaholic, we tend to find energy in the next project. One, I feel like looming chaos is not over, which I'm kind of existing in this space of like, here I am embodying all of this information that I'm trying to conduit out to all of you, and nowhere to put it. So I kind of feel like I'm in the middle of being about to explode. There are tours I was supposed to give. There were people I was supposed to show the work to. There were moments I was hoping I would spend with Sephora. We were able to commission 5 new pieces. These pieces have never been seen before. And it burns me up that people can't, but there will be more shows for all the curators out there. She's amazing to work with. Work with her, give her another show, give her more books, everything.
Yeah.
But as far as self-care, I think it's just jumping onto the next horse because there's just more work to do. I'm not established enough to just sit around. So on to the next.
But I also think, one project, like you said, it always leads to the next. There are always going to be more doors that are open, and you're finishing one and you're kind of rolling out into the next one, especially people like you who are so productive and so talented. So we have one last question. I just want to say too, just in terms of what's out there, what's going on in Atlanta. Cosmo White, who's a professor at Morehouse of Art, had a recent exhibition. One question wanted to know what your thoughts were about that show. I'll have to say I didn't get to see it, but we did have a chance to see his work that was included in a group show at the High Museum earlier in the fall, and I'm a big fan. But I'm going to roll this question into the last question, who's posed by Lauren Harris. What's next for you, TK?
If you want to know what I thought of Cosmo's work, you can go to Art Paper's website and read the review, the interview I did with him right after that exhibition came out. It came out at the top of the year. It's called Mining the Body for Gold. If you want to know what I specifically thought of that exhibition, you can go to artsatl.com and read that review.
Okay, we've got 1 minute. What's next for you?
And what's next for me? Life as an independent curator, the fellowship ends in July. It's been an amazing opportunity, and I'm going to continue doing the work. I'm going to continue writing. I got the opportunity at Atlanta Contemporary to curate the project spaces during the biennial. So I'm leaving Atlanta, but I'll still be around.
All right. We know you'll still be around. Thank you so much, TK Smith, for joining us today. TK Smith, the Tina Dunkley Fellow at the CAU Art Museum. And thank you all for joining us. Look out for us next Thursday, where we're also going to be going live from noon until 1 with another amazing conversation. And we hope that you all take care in this time. Yes. And also, just enjoy the day and support artists and support those that are around you. Take good care. Thank you again, TK.
Thank you all so much.
Bye.
Bye now.
Bye.